Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Southeast of Normal. I'm here with Jami from Digibox. Now, Jami was part of cohort 13 at Accelerating Asia, and he's been building one of the last mile delivery platforms in Bangladesh. So, Jami's story is about building infrastructure where almost none existed. He's also unusual because he combines deep technical expertise and years of logistics experience and public sector digital transformation. And he's had successful exits as well. BD Tickets, OLX Bangladesh, EK Shop were all part of his portfolio before he actually started Digibox. So him and his co-founder built Digibox entirely bootstrapped to where it is today, designing both the hardware and the software themselves, rather than importing an existing solution. So rather than just like take all of Jami's thunder here, let me hand it over to Jami. Why don't you just give a quick introduction about yourself, and we'll then play a quick 1 minute elevator pitch as well that we've got.
Hi, Osman, and I'm glad that I got this chance to appear here. So I'm Jami. I'm founder of Digibox. Digibox is my fourth, let's say, entrepreneurial initiative after I have exited successfully from my previous ones. I had extensive experience working with e-commerce and logistics as well as digital transformation in my various roles previously, and I saw one nagging kind of gap in Bangladesh market where the digital logistics system is kind of underdeveloped or in some cases completely broken, and nobody was working on it because developing infrastructure is hard and nobody wants to go into the infrastructure business itself. So rather than developing just another logistic company solving logistic problems, we thought about creating an infrastructure company solving a logistic problem, and that's how Digibox came about.
Okay, so before we actually start talking about Digibox, let me just play this 1 minute elevator pitch. Thank you, Accelerating Asia, for lending us the video, and we'll play that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more.
Hi, I'm Jami, founder of Digibox, a last-mile IoT delivery locker startup from Bangladesh. We have built an infrastructure as a service network in Bangladesh to cater to the last-mile deliveries for e-commerce, banks, and other enterprises. You might think, what a last-mile delivery locker solution doing in Bangladesh? We have actually made the efficiency of last-mile delivery solutions much higher, and we have cut down the cost of last-mile delivery by 50%. We have 55 locations all across Bangladesh, and we have done over 1 million deliveries so far. We are raising our first round of $300,000 to raise our current monthly revenue from $15,000 to a yearly turnover of over $1 million. I hope you will join us.
All right. I mean, these are the kind of things which I really enjoy watching, right? Because that's a very succinct introduction to what Digibox does. But I mean, when people think about logistics, they think about delivery riders, they think about all the things that people are trying to do to get the product to the consumer. But you looked at the problem and decided the real opportunity wasn't the riders at all. So what is broken about last mile delivery in Bangladesh that most people never notice?
Like when you look at wildfires, the cutthroat, or knee-jerk reaction that you'll get from firefighters would be just to drop water, right? Just to blows out the wildfire. But sometimes the most effective method is to starve the fire of the oxygen that is necessary for that fire, right? So if you look at logistic from that, example that I have just given, if you look at the inefficiencies in logistic sector, more often than not, you will find entrepreneurs coming up with more delivery riders, a bigger, kind of a tech platform to track that delivery, doing a kind of a tracking system, go cheaper by throwing more money at the problem in terms of manpower, in terms of systems.
Mm.
Then I looked at it, or we looked at it from a different perspective. Like, what are the deficiencies that Bangladesh market? In fact, not only Bangladesh. If you look at Southeast Asian countries, other countries like, let's say, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, other developing countries in South America, even Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar. What one single problem that they have? One, uh, you know digitization is there, mobile penetration is there, youth population is there. However, access to those digitization is fragmented. How? Like, if you ask any Bangladeshi that, uh, are you on internet, they'll say, yes, I'm on internet. Anybody you ask, day laborer, anybody. However, how do you define internet? If you ask, what you use using internet, and then they'll
Yeah.
say, yeah, I go into Facebook with internet, that's it.
Yeah.
So in developing countries, the digital connectivity more often than not is only, let's say, access to social media. Correct.
Yeah.
So automation didn't happen. So this is one problem. And second problem is, so they don't use, the large consumer base actually don't use digital systems. So whenever startups are investing in digital systems, actual problem is not getting solved. And number two, the core infrastructure is lacking. How? Like, I'm talking about Bangladesh, the addressing system doesn't work efficiently. So if you look at any developed country, for example, Singapore, USA, anyway, UAE, uh, when you get an address with a PO box, that means a parcel or a logistic delivery will come right at that address. In countries like Bangladesh, the addresses more often than not is, the yellow color building behind that big banyan tree. You
Yeah.
understand? So,
I do.
so
Yeah.
then the whole logistic is dependent on a memory layer of a person doing the last mile deliveries, right?
Yeah.
So however you throw system at it, it will not be efficient. You can't predict that when the last mile delivery will happen. So we thought, if you look at the whole logistic chain, there is origination, mid mile, last mile. I'm not going to go into technical jargon, but if you just look at that addressing part, if you can fix that, then a lot of other problems gets fixed. Then number three is the cost. In a developing country, cost is a very big issue. If you talk about consumers, if you talk about businesses, you have to be very cost competitive in this arena. Now, a locker network or even a logistic network, let's say for Amazon, companies like Amazon, or in China even Alibaba, that's not that big of an issue. The reason is, you have enough capital within the market to throw at that problem. This is one. Number two is, uh, the value of money for part, let's say, per parcel or part delivery, those kind of unit economics works in their favor. If you go to an economy where the currency is pretty weak, that unit economics actually breaks down when you're talking about infrastructure, because that motorcycle maybe which you are using to deliver the package costs almost the same in China and in Bangladesh. However, in Bangladesh, the purchasing power parity wise, that is a very costly thing, and in China, that's a very cheap thing, right? So then we thought about, why not we compress the whole thing into one single place where the delivery cost gets reduced by multiple times, not only percentage. So our goal was to find a solution which reduces the delivery cost by factor of multiples, and then reduces the increases the efficiency by a factor of multiples. So
Yeah.
that's why we looked at the problem in that manner, and we came up with Digibox.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I didn't understand this problem properly until I actually spoke to the a team from Barikoi in Bangladesh who are delivering their own mapping platform in Bangladesh. And even then, I said to them, "Well, Google does this, and Apple Maps do this," and they were like, "No, you don't understand the problem." And then when I went to Karachi and I was looking for my Airbnb, the address was the street behind the Suzuki showroom in Gulshan Iqbal. And I'm thinking, what happens when the showroom moves? What will happen then? And I managed to find the place. The directions were okay, but this wasn't a normal address, and the postcode didn't work or anything like that. But the driver knew, okay, there's a showroom for Suzuki over here. I'm going to turn right here, and then we'll find it from there. And only then did I really understand that this problem is permeating across not just Pakistan or Bangladesh, but across all of these developing nations, Myanmar, Cambodia, that we're familiar with in Southeast Asia, all the way through Africa as well. It's not like we're unique here. I think the exception is the places like Europe and in UK and America where they have like postcode systems which seem to work. But yeah, really interesting. Now, before we move on, I mean, what were you doing before Digibox? Because your story is really interesting because you worked in startups, you worked in government projects and logistics. Which one of those taught you the most before you started Digibox?
Actually, my career path was pretty interesting. I started just like anybody else. I am a finance graduate, but I am a techie uh, by practice or self-taught. So I started coding way back when I was in school, but I chose finance somehow because it intrigued me. All those NPVs, IRRs, and other things. So I
Yeah,
graduated in finance. However, I did not do any kind of I did not take that path, that commercial path or anything. So I started with very techie kind of work. So I started my journey as a software developer, as a web
okay.
developer. And so, and that gave me an idea about how the technology world works. And then I went into telecoms. I worked in telecoms. And then I tried my hand in my first startup, with OLX, with BD tickets, and all those startups were bootstrapped startups, right? So
Yeah,
uh, right now there is a new term that has come up. It's called OPC. I just heard about it. 1% company, or things like that. So then we didn't know about all those things. They were pretty small teams that I started doing. However, in all of those instances, logistic was one of the components that came incidentally. So in my ticketing platform, when I launched it, uh, almost a decade back, more than a decade back. So still people do love, they were buying tickets online, but they wanted a printed kind of a copy delivered to their homes. That was
yeah,
the culture back then, right? And then I had to depend on a logistic solution, to deliver that. And then back then there was no like digital logistic solution providers at all. So part of my solution was digital, part of my solution was completely manual. So
yeah,
same with OLX. It's a kind of a Craigslist listing service. And when people connected digitally that okay, I want to buy the thing that you want to sell, then how do I get that part? That was not solved. So we
yeah,
had to find a mutual location to come and everything because there was no defined logistics. So that problem persisted. And then I went into uh, I took my exit. I thought, okay, let's take things slow, and I tried to give back to the policy sector. So I worked with UN actually, and from
eh,
UN I was placed within the government policy domain, but I was consulting with UN uh, to try to fix these things. That okay, how can we fix it from a policy angle? How can we encourage infrastructure development from a policy angle? So I
Yeah.
worked a bit there, for 6 years. I co-founded, I think, the e-commerce association in Bangladesh as well. That was a very interesting story because e-commerce only started in Bangladesh almost, let's say, 1.5 decades back. So that gave me an idea about where we are lacking in terms of policy domain as well. Now, all the subcontinent countries, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, we inherited our core legal structure and policy structure from, British. So we follow the
Yeah.
British law. However, updating those law was on us,
Mm.
our
Yeah.
nation. This is where we lacked. So a lot of gaps, the law that we started following were 200 years old. Now, updating it, different governments took different type of approaches. So it became a mishmash, and there were policy gaps. So when I looked into it from behind the policy kind of a uh, outlook or a spec, then I found out that look, only policies cannot solve a lot of other things. You need private
Yeah.
sector push in infrastructure as well to prove that look, this can be done. So that's when I thought like, okay, this is something that had been bugging me for last 20 something years. So I'll work on logistic itself, and that's why I came into Digibox. Yeah.
Okay. And this all happened over a conversation at a tea stall, right? So
Yes.
tell me more about how you met your co-founder and what actually happened and how you decided, okay, we're going to set up Digibox, we're going to do this.
So during COVID, let's say 2020, 21, around that time, I was working with that policy unit. I have already exited BD tickets back then. So I was taking things slow. Now the country was in lockdown. For my policy unit that I was working, I was put in charge of creating, it's called business continuity plan,
Yeah.
for the government, on logistics. What happens when this kind of pandemic arrives? How
Yeah.
do logistic? So I was drafting that, and I drafted it. It got adopted and everything. The country was in lockdown. This is early 22, end of 21, 22. And then my father actually contracted COVID. I lost him, unfortunately, back in 2020. So that had a tremendous effect in me. So in
Yeah.
2021, I was thinking, you know, how did he contracted? He was following everything, and so the whole country was then running on those deliveries, right? So delivery people were coming into your homes, delivering it, and because our logistics was inefficient, there were still people contacts, right? Because you had to take
Yeah.
hold of the deliveries. And then I was looking at all those international Amazon lockers and everything, and I thought if that were available, then it would have been a very interesting way of not contracting COVID. I can take my parcel myself and everything. So in my garage, I started tinkering with creating a prototype myself. I had time,
Oh, well, okay.
so I created a prototype box with Arduino and initial piezoelectric motors and
Yeah.
anyway. So I created a Almira, let's say, in my garage, and it worked. So I had the initial idea that okay, this is something that I can work. I tried to find resources online. If I want to buy this kind of solution, what cost it would have been, and it was huge cost. And I thought about what is the import cost in Bangladesh, and it's huge. It is not viable to import that technology. I was at that stage. And then there was this COVID lockdown relief kind of every evening you get few hours to do your groceries and everything. So during those hours, I took my wife. We went to a kind of a drive-through tea stall in a very posh area in Dhaka, And I actually parked my car, was waiting in the counter with a cup of tea, and my co-founder, whom I know, I knew from I think 12 years or 13 years back when we worked briefly together on a telecoms project. And during that time, in the last decade or so, we had no contacts.
Yeah.
So, and he also came there with his wife, parked there, and in the queue itself, we met, and we got to talking. How are you? What have you been doing? And the conversation went into logistics because he was also doing logistics for the past 12 years, and he
Yeah.
was also very frustrated about the last mile bit. And I shown him in my phone that look at this Almira thing that I've been building. And we actually shook hands then and there. We said, look, this is a problem that we both are passionate about. Why don't we together try to solve this? And
Yeah.
from there, Digibox started actually.
All right. I mean, this is a really great story because normally, like, my next question was going to be talking about hardware. Like, why do hardware when nearly every startup founder will tell you just focus on the software? It's very easy. But here you actually did look at the market and you said, this capability, even if I bought it from outside and brought it in, even from China, it would be too expensive. Break the break even point would be too far. Am I right in saying that, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
So this tells me as well, you also decided you could do this better, faster, and cheaper by building the entire hardware platform with your software, all from within Bangladesh. So when people talk about solutions tailored to their local dynamics, this is exactly what we see. We see a founder realizing that this is the solution, but the current market opportunity that you can take from isn't going to address that. So you solve that particular problem by building it. And I think you said something like with your platform, it's something like $3,000 to have it up and running, and then you get your payback within 6 months.
6 or 7 months,
Yeah,
ideally. The reason we went into hardware is hard anyway,
yeah,
anyway, and you know general wisdom will tell you that why are you like trying to reinvent the wheel, when a lot of Chinese companies, they are very good manufacturing wise. China dominates the world. The issue is not only procuring your solution. Software, I don't go into software because for a subcontinent guy, we all understand that developing software in subcontinent will be very cheap. Holding on to that
yeah,
IP will be very cheap. So that's a given. Now, hardware wise, people don't look at one thing, that is, hardware doesn't come by itself. It's not like you are buying a ratchet or a screwdriver which does
yeah,
not need maintenance, right? A screwdriver doesn't need maintenance until or unless it gets broken, right? And you
yeah,
just throw it away. When you are creating, when you are buying an hardware, it has a lifetime, a time limit, that how long it can run. This is one. Number
yeah,
two, you need support. If something breaks down, what will happen? And so uh, you'll see, for example, in Taiwan, who are making chips, the hardware is being given by a Netherlands company, right? ASML.
yeah,
It is being serviced by ASML. If it breaks down, there is no Taiwanese company who can, Foxconn cannot fix it. ASML
yeah,
will come and, so calculate about the cost of that as well. So when we thought about all of this, then total cost of your acquisition becomes so high, it doesn't make any business sense. So that's why we thought about going into it. This was one. Number two, Bangladesh, countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India, we are unique. For example, uh, steel, the box that we are creating, these are metal boxes, right?
yeah,
Pakistan and Bangladesh are one of the biggest ship recycling countries.
yeah,
So the whole country infrastructure, if you look at buildings made of steel and everything, all came from ships. So we are
yeah,
recycling ships and everything. So I looked at raw materials, And I thought, come on, the Chinese have to use steel, which they have to, take out, either buy it as an ore and then,
That's it. Yeah.
process it. And I'm just freaking recycling, recycled ship steel. So that is cheap. Number two,
Yeah.
labor is cheap. Number three, when I create a solution specifically for the environment and the security issues of Bangladesh. The Chinese built machine is not catered to that. And if I want to create a custom kind of a solution, it would have been costing more. So that's
Yeah.
why we went into hardware.
Okay. And now let's just look at that. When you did the demo day a few weeks ago, you had 55 lockers serving hundreds of thousands of deliveries. Where do you think you'll be this time next year?
This time, so when we did the demo day, we were at 55. If
Yeah.
we talk about today, we are at 60. So from demo day on 15th to 26th, already we have grown a little bit.
Like
So by
within 2
end of
weeks.
this year, we will be around 110. And by end of next year, we are hoping we will be around 500 places. So imagine the rate of growth that we are growing.
Yeah.
So ultimate goal is to encompass Bangladesh with these smart locker boxes, and by our calculation, it would need around 2,500 or 3,000 installations to cover, let's say, 70 or 80% of the last mile logistic needs for individual person. And then we want to actually grow regionally. This platform is not available, or this methodology is not available in countries like Myanmar, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, Nepal. So
Yeah.
there we want to expand also. So in next 2 or 3 years, hopefully Digibox will be around 5,000 installations that we will manage, and across this region. Interesting fact, Usman, organically, from Uganda, I shouldn't name the, e-commerce platform. From
Yeah.
Uganda, somebody, one of the leading e-commerce platform in Uganda, they actually sent us a query that what would it take to install Digibox there? And that,
Yeah.
that was so surprising. And we understood that we are doing something which the whole, what we say, third world or the developing economy actually needs.
Yeah. No, and this is really amazing because um, when I talk to other founders as well, they always talk about an international requirement. Oh yeah, we're going to grow internationally, but here it's the other way around. You're not pushing the product; people are actually pulling you into their domestic markets. Which reminds me as well, like uh, one of the conversations we had while we were over in Bali on the retreat was how you actually bid for this with, and I don't want to mention the name of the company, but it was a predominant, platform in Bangladesh. Parent company is Chinese. They already had their own locker platform here, and you explained how you bid for that project in an open RFP, and you won that project against technically an incumbent who has an established solution. It
Yeah.
works, but the capability that you had, both in terms of what you can do, what you deliver, and at the price point that's needed, was so much more favorable than what the competitor was offering, or rather the parent company was offering. And this blew my mind because up until that point, you'd never mentioned this. It was like just an
Yeah.
afterthought, like, oh yeah, we won against this, and we know that our solution is better because we've competed fairly and we still won, and that really blew my mind. And I thought, if you're competing against a Chinese incumbent who has their own platform, rolls out at volume, and they're cheaper, right? They think they're cheaper, but then you come in and you're even cheaper than them. So delivering exactly everything that they want in terms of security, reliability, uptime, all of those things, the locations that are needed, and you're doing it at a price point which actually makes it economical.
And
you're
so
onto something. This is something that can grow into Africa with no issue, into places like Pakistan and Nepal with zero issue. Yeah,
and so and my experience had something to do with that. I don't want to sound smug, but if you look at Digibox, I look at it because it came from my own life experiences. Like I
yeah,
look at Digibox as a mix between a telco business and a hotels business.
yeah,
It looks very, weird, right? How a telco business. So imagine you are a telco. Now, if you don't have good network in some part of the city, as a consumer, you will never choose that telco because I might not go to that part very often, but what if
yeah,
I want to go? The
yeah,
same thing is happening with EV, right? So
yeah,
people don't buy EV because they're thinking, what if I run out of juice? With
yeah,
gas, at least I know I can fill it up. Anyway, so I'm not going into that, but the whole idea is in a telco that's the case. So in Digibox, if you have your installation in places where there are deliveries, then people will come. This is
yeah,
one. Number two, how much within that box is actually occupied or actually serving customers. So that directly falls into your, profitability and everything. So if you mix these two, then a very beautiful kind of a I shouldn't say algorithm, a beautiful kind of a formula arrives. And what happens with this kind of box incumbents, that you don't find, there are very rarely companies who are only doing this kind of logistics, right? Worldwide there may be maybe 20, 30 companies like this. Otherwise, when you are talking about the Chinese incumbent, for the Chinese incumbent, they were a logistic players who happen to have this kind of box as a last mile option. It was not their
yeah,
primary thing. If you look at DHL has this kind of boxes. They buy it
yeah.
from
They
China,
do.
but DHL's core business is not these boxes. So because our core business is on these boxes, the efficiency that we bring in specifically on those boxes is much higher than anybody else that
Yeah,
competes with us. So that's I think why we own that. And right now in banking sector we are also growing.
yeah. So just talking about what you're currently doing, you bootstrapped all the way through to where you are now. I mean, what are your thoughts now? Do you kind of wish you'd carried on bootstrapping to where you are today, or do you wish you'd actually raised VC funds earlier?
I wish right now, after Accelerating Asia, and a huge thanks to Accelerating Asia to um, you know give me that knowledge, give us that knowledge, because we were, my experience was always bootstrapping, right?
Yeah,
uh, Unlike my previous startups which were software or platform, scaling a SaaS product or scaling a platform, digital platform, doesn't take that much of capital in,
yeah,
except let's say human resources, IP, those kind of things.
yeah,
Hardware or an infrastructure, a startup like us is capital heavy or asset heavy. The growth in last 2 years since our founding, if we raised before, now I understand that we could have grown more, because we have a very good business, ROI wise and other things wise. So we could have grown more. So that is a learning. And I believe going forward for a company like us, I think raising was the right kind of an approach.
yeah. Okay. Um, I just wanted to ask another question really about Bangladesh in particular. Now that you've come and visited in Bali, you've been to Singapore for Demo Day, and you've met lots of investors and people who want to know more. I mean, what's the typical misconception people have that about Bangladesh startups and founders that you found that you needed to keep on repeating to say, this is what we are. We're not like what you think. Was there anything that jumped out at you that you feel that you needed to address?
Yes, multiple things, but one major thing, there is a, I should say there is a branding problem with Bangladesh.
Yeah,
We are not doing good enough from our end to brand Bangladesh to potential investors or attract more FDI.
yeah,
The core reason behind that was everybody is very worried about the regulatory environment in Bangladesh.
yeah,
What happens if you don't know enough about the country? There is a misconception that as a foreign investor, if you come into Bangladesh, there is no way for you to exit, or there is no way for you to repatriate your investment if, let's say, things fail or things go south.
yeah,
That it have been an issue years back, but since long that policy has been corrected. Right now, the policy umbrella is there in Bangladesh to give investors that assurance that, look, whatever you invest, you can exit, you can have a 100% FDI kind of a scenario where you can not only take your dividends out, you can take repatriate your whole investment out whenever you want.
yeah,
Another uh, thing was prevalent as whether the Bangladeshi founders have enough, what should I say, from a knowledge point of view on how to have a fiduciary kind of discipline. So
yeah,
that's another issue that came up, and I admit that yes, there are lackings within Bangladeshi founding community on that, and that is actually coming because of those knowledge bases are not yet widely available in Bangladeshi founder arena or the startup arena. Still
yeah,
there are government initiatives to bridge that gap, and of course accelerators like Accelerating Asia is doing a great job of bridging that gap as well. So things are moving in the right direction, and that's what I am also communicating to my investors, that look, right now Bangladesh is in a very interesting space and time where your investment can give you manifold returns, because a lot of infrastructural things are yet to be invested on.
yeah.
You can, maybe they are an old news or an old story elsewhere, but they are completely new in Bangladesh.
Yeah, and there are two aspects of the concerns for international investors from my perspective that I meet. One is, yeah, do I invest my money into Bangladesh and how do I get it out? That's one thing. And and you know this now. I mean, when Accelerating Asia are investing, they require you to re-domicile your HQ and a holding company structure here in Singapore so that the investments for international investors are based in Singapore. So your company, your operational company, is like a sub entity to the holding company in Singapore. So most of the investments are actually done directly onto the holding company, meaning dividends they are treated by Singapore law, and any exits are done. The capital gains are done through Singapore law, and we all know at the moment that dividends and capital gains are tax free here in Singapore. So it's very beneficial for both the founder and for the
And
investor to do that. Um, so those are some of the things that people seem to forget. Now, the other concern is really just around the operational impact of Bangladesh as a country. And everybody that we talk to seems to think, Bangladesh, it's this tiny country. We forgot all about them, right? So we have investors who come from India. Now, now my experience has been that India has got its own venture capital space and they're just focused on India. But unfortunately, if you're a larger VC fund and you've got a team in India, what typically happens from like the main person in Europe or in America, they'll say, "Oh, India, you can look after Bangladesh."
mm,
Now, if you're an analyst in India, you're going to say, "I've got so much deals going on in India. I'm not even going to look at Bangladesh. There's no point. It's a rounding error when you're looking at a population of 1 billion people and a population of 180 million people, it's not worth it, right? And so I found that just blew my mind, that you're walking away from an entire market. Yet these same people are talking about Indonesia and how big that market is, and it's 220 million people, not that much different to
Yeah,
Bangladesh.
exactly.
So it blows my mind that when you're doing the relativeness of it, you're thinking, yes, it's small, but actually, if you were to just look at it in comparison to other Southeast Asian nations, then actually it's a huge market. It's a big market. The other interesting thing was that people have this like propensity to want to invest in these large markets, but they have, if you're a VC fund from Singapore, you would say our mandate covers Southeast Asia. That's Myanmar all the way through to Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. What
It
happened to
stops at
Bangladesh?
it stops at Myanmar border.
Yeah.
Nothing left of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
not
but
only
yeah. So any large investor or any investor with a bit of mind will say eventually people will realize this. But by that time, the people who are going to make the most returns on their investment have got in before everybody else is.
exactly.
Which is
And
where
you-
we're at now.
And then another very interesting thing is you have to look at this kind of small countries. I'm not talking about Bangladesh also. I'm also talking about Sri Lanka, Nepal, Pakistan.
Yeah.
Now, Pakistan has a little bit of advantage because of somehow from MENA region, Pakistan gets put in. There is a term called MENAP, MENA and Pakistan. So,
Yeah.
somehow these three countries, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal, they're forgotten. Bhutan,
Yeah.
I'm not even talking about. They are forgotten. Now, interestingly, these small countries have another very interesting dynamic. If you talk about Indonesia or even Philippines, connecting to that population, as you said, 180 million and 220 million, connecting that population which are dispersed or distributed among how many islands and cities and everything. In countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, most of the market sits in, let's say, 4 or 5 major cities.
Yeah.
If you talk about geographically, if you talk about communication wise, if you talk about logistically, this is so easy from an investment point of view, right? Like, for example, Dhaka, the capital of Bangladesh, you can't even imagine 30 million people sits here only. So, in some countries are not 30 million people, right? So, from a market opportunity point of view, this is amazing. Those
Yeah.
guys who are doing it early.
Yeah. No, and I mean, this is a problem that I had as well when I worked at Telstra, right? Because I remember being told by a very arrogant sales manager based in Sydney that he didn't need me to explain to him the dynamics of Asia. Like, I know everything. We sell everything in Australia and we know everything. And then I just said to him, but your entire population in Australia is not even as big as the metropolitan area of Tokyo. Like, there are more people in Tokyo than there are in all of Australia. So when you're telling me and lecturing me that because you've done something in Australia, you can translate that to Asia, you're wrong.
Exactly.
And it just really blew my mind that there was that level of like arrogance. And I still get investors saying, yeah, we're only going to look at Australian startups and things like that, which I get. There are some very amazing companies, Canva, Atlassian, they're the billion-dollar companies coming out of Australia. We understand that. And there are billion-dollar companies coming out of Bangladesh too. I mean, it's just that because it's Bangladesh, it doesn't hit the headlines, and they're addressing niches which don't address globally. Atlassian is a global company. We have, companies like Canva, which are global companies. But to get to $1 billion company in Bangladesh, you only need to address the local market.
No,
right?
One example is, again, I am not going to name them, They are a $1 billion company. They are a mobile financial service company in Bangladesh. They are a startup,
Yeah.
and they have hit $1 billion status long back. And they got investment from Ant Financial,
Yeah.
from Alibaba Group and everything. But again, they don't need to look outside, because just serving the local market, the underserved, they have reached the billion status. So we'll see more of those examples in coming years. You talk
For
about
sure.
healthcare, logistics, education. So in across the board,
Yeah.
the market is so big. If you look at the economic outlook of the country, the rising middle class, uh, the market is right there for the taking.
Yeah, no, true. And but before I mean, we've been talking for nearly 45 minutes, and I'm gonna really struggle to tailor this down. But in terms of things around what you found most stressful, I just want to know a little bit about you as a founder. What's the most stressful week you've ever had as a founder? I mean, is there an example that you can pick out?
Yeah, yeah. If you talk about a week, so investment wise, because I come from a finance background and my co-founder is also coming from a logistics aviation background,
Yeah,
we didn't worry about that. That was always very well planned. We knew what to deploy when. The stress came from what happens when we scale, the supply versus demand, the usual stuff, during a very challenging time. So the stressful time happened when, 2 years back, there was this, uh, you know, Bangladesh went through a revolution, a reinvention of its identity 2 years
yeah,
back. And it turned out to be better for everybody. But during that upheaval, during the same time, we are passing through that same time right now, during July back then, our network had to be physically shut down. And it had all the, parcels or packages inside. And
yeah.
when startups talk about this thing called GMV, gross merchandise value,
Oh,
and
yeah,
we never, and that's another unique thing about Digibox. We never talk about GMV, because if we
yeah,
start counting GMV, it would be huge, you know.
yeah,
But we don't count GMV. But then that came into our view, that because those packages are expiring, and if there was any security kind of an issue, what will happen with the huge value of products that are there, so yes, 1 week was pretty stressful. But then again, we found out that usually when nobody moves around 2 a.m. at night or 3 a.m. at night, when logistic, if everything is running, still logistic doesn't run. At
yeah,
that time, actually, our network actually ran. So that particular week or 2 week, that was also during monsoon. Monsoon in Bangladesh is always pretty challenging. So it was one of the most challenging weeks
yeah.
in my entrepreneurial life. Yeah, and we
Wow.
went out of it more stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you told me about the robustness of your lockers, but yeah, I can imagine when the entire network goes down and you can't operate it. Yeah, the amount of stress that you have is just phenomenal. Um, okay, I think we're going to try and wrap up now. I mean, let me just ask one or two more questions, and then we'll definitely wrap it up. Um, I mean, if I was to look at um, you know what your uh, if you were to look at Digibox now in 10 years time, what would it be? What would you want people to describe Digibox as? Would it be the Amazon locker, or is it something completely different?
It would be something completely different. It's not Amazon Locker. I want to become synonymous with sending stuff. Like in Bangladesh, that mobile financial service I'm talking about,
Yeah,
they have become synonymous with sending money. So people don't talk about,
yeah,
let me send something to you. They say, let me blip you,
yeah,
that company name.
yeah,
I want Digibox to become that. So
Yeah.
that's my goal. So if I want to send somebody, my vision is I go in front of a locker, I put something in, and then Osman, in front of your locker, that thing comes out. So
Yeah.
we want to make that happen anyhow. So in 10 years
Yeah.
of time, I want to see that happen, and not
That's
only in Bangladesh, across this area.
Yeah, no,
Region.
that's a really good point because, like, if I need to get something across town, I will use like Lala Move here in Singapore, and we literally say, "Oh, I'll Lala Move it to you," right? And what you're
No,
saying is you want
the
people
same
to be,
thing.
I'll
I-
Digibox it to you.
I'll use Uber. So
Yeah,
the core idea is that, and then Digibox is not only a box. Ultimately,
yeah,
banks are using it for secure fintech connectivity. Then
yeah,
there will be DigiClean. So imagine you put your laundry into that box, and after a few hours you take them out, right? So we are
yeah,
we are we are going to start piloting it in January. Then there is Digi Food. So a lot of other digi things, digi wheels, other things are
yeah.
coming. So on the last mile bit, I want it to become synonymous with your last mile.
Great.
Logistics.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up, but maybe what we can do is in like 6 months' time or a year's time, we can come and like revisit where Digibox is and how well you're progressing. Yeah, no, Jami, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today, and hopefully there's enough questions here. If you've got any other questions, by all means, don't forget to um, like, comment, and subscribe. And if you are interested to know more about Digibox, reach out to Jami, and their website is here at digibox.com.bd. All right, thank you, and see you on the next one.